Welcome to The Next Word. I'm Chris Warnke. I'm your host of tonight's program. And with us, we have a distinguished person who is the president of the former Intelligent Officers Association, as well as a faculty on the Institute of World Politics. And we're going to truly learn about the inner workings of the CIA. And that's what I want to learn about for the last several weeks, and so does the world.
So does everyone else.
So does everyone else. So I'm thrilled to have you here.
Thank you.
If I can call you Gene.
Yes, please.
Gene, you have an illustrious career, certainly with the CIA. I know you've been decorated a number of times. Of course, you say to me that everybody gets decorated, but I'm sure there's a lot of merit in that decoration.
You bet.
But you started with the CIA when?
The end of 1959. I had been an electrical engineer and physicist working for Bell Telephone Laboratories, then at Cape Canaveral, Florida, where I was a missile guidance test engineer. And it was there that I came into contact with people from the CIA. And apparently they were looking for people with my expertise in missile guidance systems, and made a pitch, if you will, and I decided to join. I didn't even know what the CIA was at the time. Could have been the Culinary Institute of anything. But nonetheless, I accepted the job, and it was a wonderful decision. I made the best decision of my life.
I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, institution, and we thank
Indeed.
The hidden heroes, really, truly, who do remarkable work in the safety of certainly in securing the safety of our country, and you all deserve a lot of credit, Now, but going back, though, you went to Citadel, which is the military academy.
Yes, I was a veteran student at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, which was my hometown.
Oh, that's going to say you're from Charleston.
Yes.
Yes. I saw that. And you know,
it was a
wonderful town.
Great school and town.
And great school and town. But then you went on. You're a physicist and an engineer.
I studied both subjects. Yes.
So you're very smart. We know you're very smart. And then you went on, though, and you got your graduate degree from the Institute of World Politics, which we're going to talk more about later.
Right.
But so you came up to Washington in the 50s, or you're too young for that?
1959.
Okay, 1959. Okay. And when was the CIA? When was it created, though? Because that's something I know the viewers would want to know.
The CIA was created in 1947.
Okay.
The National Security Act under President Truman, and its early days, it was really basically manned and staffed by the former OSS officers from World War II. But then over the years, it's morphed into more or less a very comprehensive organization, doing everything from, we call it spying or what have you, but it's also a very high-tech organization. And the CIA was involved in converting, you might say, during the Eisenhower administration, the intelligence. We had no intelligence about the Soviet Union, and as a result of that, President Eisenhower called together his chief scientists in the country, his science advisors, and then they recommended that to get all the intelligence that we needed, since we did not have spies in the Soviet Union, came up with the idea that we needed to do aerial reconnaissance. So he had that experience from World War II. And then, you know the story from there, the CIA built the so-called U-2 spy plane.
Let's talk about that. Tell us. It's fascinating.
Well, it turns out that here again, you have to realize the Soviet Union was expanding at the end of World War II, whereas the U.S. had sort of closed up shop. The soldiers came home, and we went to rest. But the Soviet Union continued to expand and occupy. Their mission was to dominate the world with communism. But Eisenhower with the right men at the right time, insisted that we need to know what's going on in the Soviet Union. So the only way to do that was to go over the Iron Curtain, and that meant aerial reconnaissance. But Eisenhower basically ordered three things. He suggested to the CIA, you need to get into that spying business and get spies into the Soviet Union. And number two, we need to do aerial reconnaissance. And since it has to be done in secret, he wanted the CIA to take that job on. But he recognized early on that the Soviets are building advanced anti-aircraft missile systems, and the U-2 would have a short life. It'll eventually not be able to continue. So he ordered at the same time that the CIA needed to start building satellites to take photographs to replace the U-2, which would have a short life. Well, surprise, surprise, U-2 lasted 4 years. But then it did get shot down, as we all know. But within just a couple of months after the U-2 was shot down, the first successful satellite succeeded. And on its first mission over the Soviet Union, it got more photography in one mission than the CIA had collected in 4 years. So wow. The CIA became basically the high-tech intelligence place. And I was lucky enough to be involved in those programs. And so, right time, the right place.
Right. Now, speaking of shot down, or speaking of planes going down, I know you wrote about the Polish airplane crash that carried, of course,
yes,
the Polish dignitaries. How many years ago was that?
3.
3 years ago, correct. And you wrote about it. And you were criticized on some levels.
Of course.
So tell me, why were you criticized, and tell me your thought process.
I think I had more support than I had criticism. Basically what it was that anyone that has a career in the intelligence service of our country, he's got an advantage. He knows, because of access to all the classified information, he knows what's really going on in the world compared to what you hear on TV or read in the newspapers. And I knew that the Soviet Union had a history of shooting down civilian airplanes, among others. But it goes back, they had killed, assassinated, and murdered about 23,000 Polish military officers at the beginning of World War II, and they blamed the Germans for 75 years. And now they had finally had to admit it recently, and there was to be a ceremony where the Polish government would go to Russia, and they would have a service where the Russians would publicly acknowledge that this massacre in the Katyn forest and before World War II. So what they did, it was my opinion and my guess, when the entire Polish government, the key people in that Polish government, boarded one airplane to go to Russia, the plane crashed and they were all killed.
Right. And it was the entire, it was truly a lot of, it was the whole cabinet to a degree.
It was only it was my assessment only that the Russian behavior after that crash was more of a criminal covering up a crime scene than anyone that was concerned about the Polish people and the Polish government. But that was my assessment. And of course, I wrote about it and gave my opinion. And then it got on the internet and picked up in Poland. So they've got the ball and running with it now. I'm out of it.
Where they picked it up. And other incidents is what you've written about, the Gulf of
Tonkin.
Tonkin. Mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
Should we talk about that?
Well, the thing about the Gulf of Tonkin was the incident where the Navy ships, two Navy ships in international waters in the Gulf of Tonkin, on a dark and stormy night, thought they were being attacked by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. And that was reported back to Washington. And it turns out that the word came down to the CIA, can you verify whether there were really torpedo boats attacking or not? And I got the job to take a look at it. Well, it turns out I needed more information about the situation, the state of the weather, etc., etc., the depth of the water, and so on. But those ships had not detected any actual radar tracking of the ship. But but before I got my information, got my answers back, President Johnson went ahead and ordered the Navy to start flying and attacking North Vietnam in Hanoi. So that was he wanted to make that decision, but then after that started, I realized I got my information, and I knew there had never been a torpedo boat attacked at night. But it was too late. But the head of the CIA was named John McCone at the time. He made the point, you know, the president makes these decisions, not the CIA. Therefore, it's his nickel, not ours.
Right.
And it turns out, you know, the president can accept intelligence and do what he wants to with it, or he can ignore it. He's the boss. So.
Have you ever been in a briefing with the president?
No.
No, we've come in there.
No.
I'm assuming he gets briefed every morning by his whole team of
yes.
of security advisors, and
yes.
which is probably the most important meeting, one of the most important meetings of
yeah,
kicking off the day.
That's true. And, but I was there at the time. John McCone was the head of the CIA, but he was in all those days.
Now, was he in a career? I'm trying to think back. Was he in
No, he was not a career intelligence man by any means. He turned out to have been the head of he was an executive in the industry, and he was a Republican in the, you might say, the Democratic administration at the time, and so on. But he had been the head of the Atomic Energy Commission, very knowledgeable man. I had the greatest respect for him.
Well, we're going to take a short break, because then when we come back, we're going to talk about the Institute of World Politics, which I know you hang your other hat on.
Yes.
Which very exciting institution. So we'll be right back.
It is indeed.
We'll be right back. You're watching The Next Word. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
I think someone at my friend's school has this thing called autism. My friend's brother's son has autism. My neighbor's son has autism. My son has autism.
Autism is getting closer to home. Today, 1 in 88 children is diagnosed with autism. That's a 1,000% increase in the last 40 years. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
Welcome back. I'm Chris Warnke. I'm your host, and you're watching The Next Word. Tonight we have a special guest, Eugene Poteat, former CIA executive, as well as president of the former Association of Intelligent Officers. Now, beyond that title, of course, you're faculty at the Institute of World Politics, located right on 16th Street, the only graduate school that truly fosters intelligence.
Well, it's the only one I know about.
Of course, the only one we know about, right.
Sure. Well, it turned out when I retired from the CIA, I wanted to perhaps teach, but I wanted to have more information. I was a specialist in the scientific intelligence side of business, but I wanted to know more about how intelligence fit in to the overall policies of the United States and how that affected our foreign policy. And I investigated and visited colleges along the east coast of the United States, and I didn't find anything that I was looking for. But then one day I saw a very small ad in the Washington Post newspaper, not much bigger than a postage stamp, and it listed 4 courses that they taught at the graduate level. And I thought they were good courses, so I signed up for 2 of them. I picked counterintelligence, and then I also picked atomic weapons policy and so on. Something I knew about in both cases. So
Atomic weapons, which I know nothing about.
Yeah. Well, I knew a little bit about that. So that would let me judge the quality of the courses. And to my surprise, the courses were outstanding.
But how old were you then? Were you just come out of?
I had just retired from the CIA.
Okay, the CIA. So you were just coming into, okay, and you were looking.
Yes.
So you went back to get your graduate degree?
Well, no, not at first. I just wanted the knowledge from those courses. But it turned out the courses were so good, and I was so satisfied, I added another course, and then another. And I became a dedicated student again at the old age. However, the school at the time was not accredited, but you got the credits for the courses you took from Boston University. And that was interesting because I knew the man that was the head of the department at Boston University, whom I'd met in England years before. What the long and short of it was, finally, after 17 courses at IWP, and I thought they were all magnificent. That was a record, by the way, I heard later. And oddly enough, they got their accreditation, and they didn't have to, rely on Boston University. So it turned out I already had more than enough courses to graduate. So so the first group, I think there were only about 4 of us, got our master's degree, and then the school now has grown.
So how many students?
I'm not sure. They have a couple hundred or perhaps maybe more. But the graduating class, rather than just being a couple of people now, is a room full.
Right, that's great. And the faculty, I mean, you have an illustrious faculty. You have former ambassadors, you have intelligence officers, you have,
yes.
That's the gamut. I mean,
that's the strength.
And that's the strength.
That's the strength.
Right.
The people that teach there are not only, they are practitioners as well as professors.
Right.
And that's the strength of IWP. You've got senior FBI people teaching there, senior State Department, former ambassadors, and former intelligence officers. It's quite an interesting place.
And I'm thrilled to know about it. And if it had been for Tricia Loic, I'm going to put a plug in for her, who is, I guess, your VP for development, who's promoted it. I mean, I had no idea it would be right there on 16th Street here, right in my backyard.
Yes.
I mean, what an amazing
it's
place, and especially in this day of time.
Exactly.
Oh my God! I mean, communications changed everything in terms of the intelligence world, but I mean now more and more so. And you have pragmatic faculty that are teaching, that have taken all that experience that they gained, in whatever capacity they served, whether it was an ambassador to a foreign country.
Everyone that teaches there has done what he teaches.
Right.
That's unique.
Well, that's unique. So it makes the whole institution unique. No, I give my hats off to the founders, and it's what, a 15-year-old, 20-year-old.
On the order of 15 years, I would judge, but I'm not accurate on that number.
Now, it's focused on graduate.
It's a graduate school only.
But you do other things, and you give out scholarships.
Now, that's an interesting relationship between the Association of Former Intelligence Officers that I represent and the Institute of World Politics.
The association gives out those.
Yes. And we, in fact, we give scholarships to students who are seeking a career in intelligence community in different place. So we give out many scholarships every year. We have the money for that. We derive that fund from endowments we've received, but we have about 5,000 members around the United States, members of AFIO, and their dues basically is what supports us. We are not the normal association, what we call a 501c3 nonprofit.
Right.
The only mission we have is to educate the public on the critical need for a strong, accountable, credible intelligence community. And a lot of the students that we gave scholarships to ended up, I understand, at IWP as well.
Now, are there chapters? I understand there are chapters within
Yes.
the association.
Yes.
Okay.
We have several
And you have an
chapters.
interesting group of there's a number of interesting speakers coming up.
Yes, we do. We've had speakers. The head of CIA has been speaker at our, and we have quarterly luncheons here in Washington. We've had the head of the Director of National Intelligence, Jim Clapper's been a speaker. We've visited inside of virtually every intelligence agency. We are the only association invited into the FBI where they presented an entire day of briefings for us, knowing that our job is to understand them so we can better educate the public about the mission of these intelligence agencies. The tragedy is that the reason we do this also turned out to be that the history books have omitted the significant role of intelligence in American history. Not a single textbook acknowledges that George Washington won the Revolutionary War
because of his intelligence.
His superior intelligence, not his battlefield performance, his intelligence.
Right. And what happened to, of course, his first intelligence officer was what, Nathan Hale?
Yes. Well, it turns out
Who was?
He was learning, and
He was learning.
And we
felt his demise.
made mistakes in the early days. But the British made the biggest mistake because they hanged Nathan Hale rather than trying to turn him to work against Washington. Right. So they ignored the counterintelligence aspects. They could have turned him into a double agent. On the other hand, when Washington captured the British head of intelligence, Major Andre, he offered to trade him for Benedict Arnold, his traitor. But they refused to give Benedict Arnold back to George Washington, so Washington hanged the head of British intelligence in the same manner that the British had hanged Nathan Hale.
And I love his quote. I regret that I had...
It was accurate.
But I do not have one more life to give to my country.
And
what a great quote.
Yeah. Well, the British acknowledged that that's what he said.
That's what he said.
We didn't invent it. The British confirmed it.
Now, going back to George Washington, because I know you've written about George Washington.
Yes.
And the Masonic Temple in Alexandria, Virginia.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a huge enclave of material about Washington, and of course...
Well, it turns out that Washington had an incredible spy network in the 13 colonies.
Really?
Yes, and part of that spy network was the Masonic lodges throughout the 13 colonies. So they had a good network.
Now, if someone goes to the Masonic Temple in Alexandria, can they go into the...
It's all there.
It's all there.
Yes.
I mean, it's all there, yeah. It's an amazing building.
It's recommend everyone should visit it and get the best view
What a
of
history.
Washington.
Well, definitely the best view, but what a history.
Well, for instance, did you know that Washington crossed the Delaware on that frozen winter night for the Hessian troops? And what the history books never mention is the fact that it was a setup. Washington's intelligence officer was in there and helped arrange that. Washington's spy, his name was John Honeyman, and he helped arrange that. He saw to it that the Hessian troops got plenty of wine to get. And Washington attacked on that night, did not lose a man, and he wiped out the Hessian detachment.
But he learned a lesson prior to that the use of intelligence was very important.
It was critical.
Critical in the battlefield.
Well, Washington was not an amateur at the business. It turned out as a young man, when he was about 21 years old, he was an adjutant in the Virginia militia right here in town. And General Braddock was the British, during the French and Indian War, General Braddock and his British Army with Washington and his Virginia militia was heading out to the Monongahela Valley, which is near Pittsburgh, to attack the French. But along the way, the French and the British had intelligence networks, and they surprised them and ambushed them, killed General Braddock, wiped out the entire detachment. Washington had his horse shot out from under him, and he survived. But he said,
and he survived and came back and then learned that very good lesson.
Don't ever go into battle without intelligence. So you got to know when to fight and when to withdraw. And that lesson he learned well.
Well, that's a good lesson for everything. I mean, whether it's some battle or...
Well, the famous...
Always good to have intelligence before you go.
The famous Chinese general said the acme of skill is not to fight on the battlefield, but to win the war off the battlefield.
Right. I love it. Now, of course, they used to use bows and arrows that they shot into forts to send messages. So we've come a long way. Now, I was fascinated to hear that hot air balloons were used as a form of sending
first aerial reconnaissance.
Messages.
Yes.
Really? The first aerial reconnaissance, okay.
Yeah, during the Civil War. I don't know how any war can be civil, but that's what they called it.
And they had hot air balloons, and they were using them to send.
That's correct.
So we've graduated significantly.
Finally.
Finally. We've totally, very much. I'm not going to ask you about, of course, Snowden. I know that's...
Thank you very much.
Yes, although I wanted to, but... Yeah.
It's unfolding, so we don't yet know.
Right.
But it's Snowden. I will say one thing, though. He's the traitor, not a spy. He's a traitor for the United States. The difference between a traitor and a spy is that the spy works for his own country against a foreign enemy. A traitor works against his own people for a foreign enemy.
Right.
That's the difference.
Absolutely.
And he fits the bill.
He fits. Now, going back to the Institute of World Politics, because I want to make, if anyone truly wanted to look at it as for a graduate degree, they go to the website. It's a www.iwp.edu. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or call me and I'll
call you. So I don't want to give out your number.
Please, thank you.
But this has been a real treat. You have to take yourself out into the classrooms more than just beyond.
Well, I do. I visit universities around the country, and I lecture on the value and importance of intelligence. And every time I go any place, young people want to know, what do I need to do? We tell them what they need to do to plan for a career in the intelligence community.
It's great. It's great. Well, the next couple of weeks will be focused on this issue here at the Next Word.
I'm sure.
And I want to bring you back so you can then talk to me about Snowden. But in the meantime, you're right. It's still unfolding. So thank you.
My pleasure.
I appreciate this. Has been great. A real education for me. And I'm sure our viewership. Thank you. You've been watching The Next Word. Hope you enjoyed the show. Have a great evening. Good night.